I'm a queen breeder, and so I have connections to hundreds and hundreds of beekeepers around the country. And I do my due diligence starting in August to find out what's going on. What are mite levels like? What are honey crops like? And this one just turned into that perfect storm where people were going for late honey and they had high mite levels, and they had dead beehives in October, which is earlier than we've ever seen.
From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. Welcome to another installment of our Commercial Beekeeper Zone segment that we have here on Pollination. I'm joined again by my co-host, Harry Vanderpool from Vanderpool Farms, just in the hills above Salem, Oregon. And this week, we have a great guest. We're joined by Russell Heitkam. Russell is a second-generation beekeeper and Northern California queen cell, package, and nuke producer. He also brokers about 7,000 hives from Oregon, but also Washington, for almond pollination. This week, this was at Harry's it was a brainstorm that came from Harry. There is talk that there is a large commercial honeybee colony loss expected this year with some tight supplies of bees for commercial pollination of crops, especially California almonds. In this episode, Russell's going to walk us through what he thinks is going on, what's the extent of the problem, and also put it up against the context of a changing landscape for pollination, particularly in California almonds, which is different from maybe a decade ago. So this week in pollination, unfortunately, we're going to delve into the potential of a really big commercial honeybee colony loss. So without further ado, let's take it away. Well, Russell, welcome to Pollination.
Thank you.
This is our commercial beekeeping segment. Welcome back, Harry, co-host for this segment. And today we're going to be talking about colony losses. And I guess maybe just to start things off, we're coming into almond pollination. And can you start off by just talking about the challenges of providing, strong colonies at a time of year when colonies are at their smallest?
Sure. The almond industry is demanding that we bring quality beehives to the orchards. For obvious reasons, they're paying a lot of money, and they will get a better pollination if they have more population in those beehives. And the way that we do that typically is we start in fall, and we feed a tremendous amount of pollen substitute, which is artificial pollen, and it basically is a stimulant that's not necessarily healthy for the bees, but stimulates the queen into getting one or two more rounds of brood cycle going. And then they go into winter with a bigger cluster. And once they go into winter, there's no way but down that those populations can go. And so the bigger, the better. And then starting right after the new year or the solstice, we will start feeding them again to kick her into gear at a time when she's not supposed to be laying eggs. So this is a trick that we have been using for decades and decades, and it works. It functions well, and that builds and maintains populations, and it keeps them from dropping off. And it's very expensive, but we feel like that comes back in spades. Either we get it in from the almond growers, or after almonds is when most of us really start making money, right? We don't really make very much money in almonds because we've already spent that money, right? I'm about to pay all my employees a 2-week paid vacation, their Christmas bonus, and we've spent a tremendous amount of money feeding pollen and syrup to our hives. And that can vary from year to year, of course, and this year was a very poor year. I'm in Northern California, and we had a grasshopper invasion, and we didn't make any honey. And this required us to feed much more. And our summer went on forever. It was 103 degrees in October.
Yes.
And so we were required just to keep this stimulation going when there was no natural stimulation. If they bring in pollen, they bring in nectar, she's going to lay eggs. If it's not coming in, we have to trick her. And so we trick her with this artificial pollen substitute, which is, for lack of a better term, it's dog food, right? It's just a protein source that we rely on, and we've relied on it for a long, long time. It's a valuable tool for us. But that's what is required for us to meet a demand. I mean, the almonds are the first thing to bloom. It's early February. It's cold still. And so it's tricky, but that's how we do it. And it works.
So to be able to pull this off, you really have to spend a lot of money and push the bees in ways that they're not used to be able to, supply what the growers need.
Yeah, we're meeting an artificial demand for. They should be shrinking, and we're pushing them to not shrink. And we benefit from that later on too. We sell frames of brood, we sell 5-frame nukes, we sell packages. And all of this is benefited by feeding artificial pollen, for sure. So it pays off.
How do you feel? I mean, do you take a peek down there in Orland at your hives during this time, or do you just kind of let them rest? I mean, do you have a sense of how things worked out for you in the fall at this time?
Yeah, well, this year was tricky because it's been warm. Yeah. It's been in the upper 60s here for the past couple weeks. And that's not good, right? The bees are just continue to fly. And so there's been a discussion amongst a lot of us down here, whether we continue to feed this pollen just to keep that stimulation going, when really what you want is you want them to shut down and hibernate and conserve energy, because they start flying to nothing. And a bee's life is measured in flight hours. And so I'm having older bees fly hard at a time when they shouldn't be. I really want them to conserve that energy until February. But we've had it where it's been pretty warm. And so then it was, well, do we feed pollen and stimulate another round? But there's also an idea that if you do that to them, you do stimulate them and they fly harder, and then the bees die. So it's a tricky one this year. I'm looking at some bees that people sent me from Oregon. They were fearful that last year it was extremely cold where they are, and that did some damage to the bees. And so they were afraid that was going to happen again. And so they asked me to take them, and they've been here for about a month, and it's been warm, right? And my crew at this moment is out feeding them syrup because they are light. We're not feeding them pollen, but we're feeding them syrup. And they said that the populations in the past 2 weeks have shrunk quite a bit. And that's just from them flying and dying, I think. So whether they came and they had viruses or something else, I don't know. But they're not my bees.
Well, you're probably hearing from lots of people who've checked into their colony. What are you hearing? What does it look like now that people are taking a check after their fall preparations? What does the nation's colony supply look like?
It looks terrible. I'll say that. And we knew that a long time ago, because the summer fall losses were tremendous, right? And probably, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but I think the national survey just came out for last year, and it was 55% loss. It's going to be way more this year. So it's looking ugly. And we knew early on that this was going to be a problem. And I make it my duty to the commercial industry so that we get as much money as we can in almonds, and we don't leave any money on the table. I'm a queen breeder, and so I have connections to hundreds and hundreds of beekeepers around the country. And I do my due diligence starting in August to find out what's going on. What are mite levels like? What are honey crops like? And this one just turned into that perfect storm where people were going for late honey and they had high mite levels, and they had dead beehives in October, which is earlier than we've ever seen. And I'm talking about 40, 50 percentile for some people, not everyone, but a lot of people. And now you go into winter and you're going to have your typical losses again. But the big fear now is what is going through winter. Is it immune to whatever was killing them before? Viruses, probably, from mites, probably. And are those going to bed and going into hibernation sick? And so we would expect that coming out of winter, we're going to see higher losses than typical. So we had higher losses early, and now we'll probably see higher losses coming out of winter. So I would expect it to be, the supply for almonds will be very limited, and quality will be questionable.
We've had years like this before. How long has it been since we've had something like this?
This one is probably going to be in line with when fluvalinate stopped working.
Oh.
And Coumaphos stopped working. Okay, so this to me looks like it's going to be dramatic.
So 18 years or what? Yeah, that's
a long time ago.
2008.
A long time ago. We've had some years where there were shortages, and last year, every year there's always seems to be a shortage, and every last bee gets rented. But this is going to be something different. It's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty major. And you know, that's tough on the beekeepers, but how do we, those of us have spent a tremendous amount of money to keep our bees healthy and good, how can we leverage that to our advantage? In the past, I'm going to throw out some fuzzy math here, but when fluvalinate went away, we went from $40 to $100 and something, right, overnight for almond pollination.
Yep.
So we were able to leverage that, boom, to pricing. And then when Coumaphos went away, we went from 100 to 175, or whatever it is. Now we're at 200. So the almond industry is not what it used to be. They're not making the money that they used to make. And so I do not believe that I can leverage my customers any further. So I'm not raising my price, but I'm not lowering my price. And there are some other issues, which is payment. So in the old days, the almond industry wanted to pay you in December, so they didn't have to pay taxes. I'm not getting those offers very much anymore. And in the old days, you would bill and you would get paid right away. It was never, hardly ever a question. And this year, it was the slowest we've ever seen. And I still have people that owe me money. And there's a lot of bankruptcies going on around us. And, you know, a big grower that I put 1,000 hives in, they could ruin me by doing a bankruptcy. I'd be done. So I'm asking for early money. That's how I'm going to leverage the situation, is I'm going to require that they pay me upfront. And if they can't pay me, someone else is going to want those bees. And so I'm going to move those elsewhere. I mean, that's hardball, but it's just protecting my business and my employees. And you know, we do a bang up job for our growers. We work really hard at that. And I think most of my growers recognize that and they appreciate that. But if they don't have money, they don't have money. And so I'm scared. I'm pretty scared about all that. And
so you're in kind of a bind, because you've just described issues from the almonds orchard, but now all of the beekeepers that supply you with bees that you broker a tremendous amount every year, and they're working hard to deliver for you, but so much is out of control for them this year, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm on the phone every day. I'm calling the guys that bring me bees every day, and a lot of them are from Oregon. And Oregon traditionally brings me great bees. There's stuff in the high desert that overwinters very well. Last year it did not. It did not. And this year they're telling me that their bees are much better than last year. So that's a really good start. But they play by the rules of whatever the standards are, and if they're not good, they don't get rented. And I get to make that decision, right? And we make it together. And a bad beehive is a bad beehive, and there's no one's going to be able to tell you that it's a good beehive. That's just not the kind of people that I deal with. They're very, very good beekeepers, and I get more money than most people, and so that's how I'm able to attract really good beekeepers, is I pay more money, and I collect more money from the growers than people do. And I'm telling you, I can't raise the price. I'm at the top end, and I don't think that their finances are what it used to be. So I'm going to have to back off on that. And certainly my costs are higher, but I have other ways to make money, right? I can sell packages, I can sell queens, I can sell nukes. Honey is not something that we typically make a lot of here in Northern California. It's just too hot and dry, but those are things that I have other ways of making money, and they don't. So there's some solidarity, right? They're our partner in agriculture, and I'm not trying to leverage more money out of them. I'm just trying to leverage payment that they will owe me, and because if they don't pay me, I'm done, right? And so that's just a protection. But yes, the beekeepers that are bringing me bees, every day we're talking. How's it going? How's it going? And they'll tell me as best they can. But yeah, they're sitting up there in Hermiston, Oregon, or something, and it's 32 degrees, and so they're not looking at beehives. But before they put them to bed and before they went into their hibernation state, they knew what they had, and they felt like they were really good. But yes, we'll see when they get here, and I'm gonna have to be conservative, right? And if I lose some customers, almond customers, because of my new demands, which I've never demanded before, never been a thing, I might lose some of those, and that's going to take the pressure off, really. And then I know that in the end, if I have extra bees, good, bad, or ugly, they will be rented to somebody, and for good money, right? Because it's going to be, it's potentially going to be a bloodbath, but I don't really know that. But I do know the situation in the industry right now, and it started in August, and it's just progressively gotten worse and worse and worse.
I guess this raises the question of how this has been communicated to growers. I know we've just had the Almond conference, and there's all the growers downstream and the extent to which colonies can recover. What are you hearing from the grower side? Are they aware that there's an issue coming up, or?
Yeah, so this is an interesting problem that we have in the bee industry. We're not always very good business people. We are somehow fearful to ask for what we deserve sometimes, and I always make it like I said, I make it my duty to call all my customers, do my due diligence, so that I can pass that information on to all the beekeepers. I go to all the meetings. I was just in San Antonio for the American honey producers, and that was really well attended. And everything that I already knew was verified to me. Brokers are looking for bees. Almond growers are looking for bees. I talked to an almond grower, a beekeeper in Washington today, and he said that he's losing a tremendous amount of hives, and he's just calling his growers and saying, I don't have the bees. What we typically do as an industry is we take care of the problem amongst each other, right? I say, Harry, I'm short 100 hives. Oh, I got them. Boom. Grower never knew there was a problem, right? And so our growers, they have no idea that there's ever been a problem, because we deliver 100% of the time, right? But really the reality of what's going on in the industry is we take care of that ourselves. And it's kind of this swirling of phone calls, and I have 1,000 extras. Oh, I need 1,000 or 100 or 500. And I have a list that I keep, and I just put people together all the time. That February 14th time right there, where people have their final numbers. And so there's great communication in our industry that way, but the communication to the beekeeper, to the grower, it's almost like we don't want them to know when they really need to know.
Yeah.
They need to know. And I made a mistake. At the California convention, the Blue Diamond rep was there, and the Honey Board rep was there, and they were speaking, and they had a really good story of telling us about how their costs have increased and their money is going down, and they have these really nice graphs. And we don't have that ability, right? If we could have that ability, but we are so disconnected all over the country that, and nobody is telling the truth. Until it's too late, right? But I wanted to stand up there in front of everybody and say, hey, look, there's a situation, and you all need to know. And I did not, for some reason. But I think that the what I said about beekeepers taking care of the problem, they can't take care of the problem this year. And so now they're just calling right to the growers or to the brokers and saying, I don't have the bees. And so brokers are looking for bees, almond growers are looking for bees, beekeepers are looking for bees. And they'll find some, but how short we come up, we'll see. But
Harry,
my growers are not going to be short. I'm going to make sure I got that taken care of.
Yeah.
Right? And they can secure bees by paying me early, right? And then I can secure bees with my friends and say, hey, look, I got paid. Here you go. Here's money right now. Let's do a contract that those bees don't walk away for a better offer, because that's going to happen too, right? People have some pretty bad contracts, right? They're not getting enough money for their bees, and people are going to offer some silly money this year. So.
Well, I think this podcast, we will make sure to get out to the commissions here in Oregon. And I guess, Harry, what happens in a bad year like this when colonies come back, trying to make a blueberry contract or trying to make a tree fruit contract? Is there enough time to recover?
Yeah, that's always a question mark. Even in the good years, you run down bees that have Russell doing backflips all the way across Heitkam's honeybees. He's so happy. But then it rains the whole time down there. And the bees come back with touches of fungal problems. And, maybe they've held their size, you hope. Hopefully they've grown. The next year, a mediocre year, but it was a great bloom year and a heavy bloom, and they come back busting at the seams. So that is always just a big question mark. I wanted to bring up, just bouncing off of Russell's comments about the messaging and where we miss out as beekeepers. I think somehow as an industry, we are, in the sense that I've had the sense along with Russell that we have a catastrophe in front of us, and you don't hear about it on the news at all. Nothing has come out in the news. I get the Capital Press, our local agricultural newspaper. There hasn't been one peep about this in the news, right, Russell?
Right. It won't happen until February, right? Everything is predicated on the almond industry. The reason we're having this podcast is probably because of the almond industry. The reason that there's all these new businesses that are popping in for mite controls and pollen substitutes, and it was just been a boom over the past 25 years because we've been responding to the almond industry. And now the almond industry, which was increasing by 30,000 acres a year every year, is now slowed way down, right? And they're ripping orchards out, and there's water issues, and so more orchards will come out. And I've always said that this is what we need, right, for the health of the bees. Okay, there's just too many bees, and there's no place to put them, right? The almond industry supplies a tremendous source of protein for a month, and then it goes away. and then we go and we search and we look and we run to the hills and we try to find stuff that's good for the bees, or we go to other pollinations, and sometimes those pollinations are not good for bees, but it's about cash flow, and I don't really see that as making money. I call it a crash flow.
Well, we the way that we many of us look at it up here in Oregon, where we have tremendous amounts of opportunities after almonds, is that's maintenance money that pays the invoice from Heitkam's honeybees for queens, Man Lake for syrup, okay. And yeah, there's been many years where we rented our hives 5 times, okay, first in almonds, and the other 4 we hoped the revenue would equal what we made in almonds.
Wow.
$35 here, 50 here, but they're hopefully located in premium locations for some honey, as well as the revenue. But yeah, and coming back, it can be really tough after a year like this, because now people are bringing their hives back, splitting them mercilessly. And as you know, Russell, up here, the weather's very, very risky.
Right.
With wet, cold springs. And when we bring the bees back from almonds, and this is said over and over between beekeepers, we're already preparing for the next year in almonds.
That's right. It starts the day after, right?
It does.
We're grafting cells, we're shaking bees, that's rebuilding the herd that has been lost, is what we do. We're splitting everything just so we can get those numbers back up again. But maybe there won't be as big a demand here. I think there's going to be a lot of beekeepers that have jumped in the past 15 years in this boom or bust kind of time, responding to $200 beehives for almonds, and they're going to go back and do their real job. Right. And I know a lot of guys that call me up and say, hey, I want to go into the bee business, and they're from Oregon. And I said, really? Well, do you mind if I ask how old you are? This is a phone call. And they'll say, well, I'm 50 something. Well, I blew my shoulder out and I can't do my other job anymore. Oh, beekeeping.
Oh, boy.
For that, right?
Oh, boy.
But you know darn well, when someone gets the bug, you're not talking them out of it. And a couple of years later, they'll say, remember when you told me? So I think a lot of those guys are going to go by the wayside just because the earning isn't there anymore. It's not like what it was. And I recognize that in my own business too. And I'm halfway through buying. I'm a second generation beekeeper. My dad built this from nothing. Yep. He went through the big boom of almonds, and the way the finances came in, and the old trucks turning into new trucks, and moving bees by hand turning into forklifts. All this stuff happened over the past 25 years, right? It was not happening when the almond industry was not very big. And so this is all really new really to everyone. This almond industry is new. The size that it is. It's always been around, but we were getting $15 a hive or something back in the day, right? But we were selling packages to Canada, and we had these other things, but we weren't making very much money. And then
it's interesting to put it in that long perspective, like these, because I guess there's a temptation to look at this as an episodic crash and things will return to normal. But what I'm getting from you in this podcast is that there's some fundamentals that have really shifted. That's not going to, the way that the industry will shake out after, a large crash may not be the same way it shook out before. And I suppose we had this question that we had set up, and maybe this gives it a different twist, but as a queen producer or for package producer or for people who are looking to rebuild on, by buying live bee colonies after almonds, clearly that is its short-term ability and availability and when they could be delivered is going to be changed, but whether you should actually, spend the money, it may also be a question. So talk a little bit about expectations, for bees, for queens, how they may need to be tempered and how they maybe need to be made against this broader perspective that you're laying out.
I think that the demand for packages and queens and nukes and beehives, buying beehives after almonds, there's always people selling double deep beehives after. And that's never a bad investment, I don't think. I think that's a pretty good way to get your numbers up, is by buying beehives right out of the almonds, because they're ready to be split right in half or thirds or quarters or however you want to do it right there. Amazingly healthy if you buy the right ones, right? You get to choose if you want that, right? And you look at the equipment and all this, but that is I think that's always a pretty good way to buy bees. Packages are going to be, I would think, I don't know this for a fact, because finances is going to be a problem, right? If people lost all this money because they didn't make it to the almonds, then are they going to have the money to buy packages and nukes and things? Mm-hmm. But they have stacks and stacks of boxes and comb in warehouses right now, and they don't want to buy any more comb. They don't want to buy any more boxes. They just want to put something on and rejuvenate the ones that they're sitting in their warehouse dead. And so I would think that there will be a good package demand. Pricing on it, we're not going to be able to do a lot, but I'll be a little more confident on asking the price that I want, and not worry about people price shopping, because I think that there's going to be a pretty good demand for that. But where's the money going to come from? That's going to be another issue. I don't know if you guys want to talk about government programs.
I wanted to ask you, while we're on queens, you have a cap on your queen production, I'm sure, or in a year like this, or a good year, you can only produce so many queens. And are you going to be rationing queens? I've seen you do that in the past when it was tough.
Yes, I have more or less, I have maximized the production of queens that I can do it, and on purpose. I figured out the number that we can do with my crew, and all of that is based on percentages though, right? And so I'm pretty conservative when I sell and book the queens, and then I almost always have a couple hundred, maybe a day, that I can call someone and say, hey, I got queens, and in April, someone's always there waiting to get them, right? So I can't really produce more. It's not like I could say, okay, we're going to gear up production because there's going to be this big demand. I'm already at the highest I think that I can do, and just hope for better percentages is the only way that I can manipulate that, or with price. And if I go up in price, it's going to be 5% or something. It's not going to be anything significant. So, I'm not even keeping up with my wages that I'm paying my guys, or insurance that I pay my guys. And, we want to be top tier place to work, and that costs money, and it's probably not sustainable. And people told me that over and over again. Hey, if you keep doing that every year, at some point you're not going to be able to do it. And I think we got there. I think we're there. And so which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate for my employees, because they always want more. and they're good employees, right? They deserve it. But if the industry is not paying what it was, I can't do it anymore. So
there are government programs for colony loss. Maybe to start off, for listeners who don't know what these programs are, just give us the brief thumbnail of what they do.
Well, in the bee industry, we have two programs, and we have a rainfall insurance, which mimics the cattle industry's rainfall insurance. And so right or wrong, the idea is that if it doesn't rain, you will have to feed more. And so there is we pay for that insurance. And then if it doesn't rain, you get a kickback so that you can buy syrup. That's the simplest way I can put it.
Okay.
It's much more complicated than that. And it is something that is really, really helping the bee industry. right? It's very, very helpful. And then with CCD, so many years ago, we got included in the ELAP program. And ELAP will recognizes that there's about a 25% just kind of national average of losses. And then when you go above that 25%, they will pay you money for the hives that you can prove that you lost. And they look at a lot of things. It's not easy to get this government money. There's a lot of paperwork involved. And so you have to prove that you were buying queens. And so people ask me for their bill from that I have, the invoice that I provide them so that they can go down to their office and show that we're doing everything we need to do to keep these bees alive, right? They ask you for receipts on your mite treatments. They ask you for receipts on your feed. And they just want to make sure that it's not fraudulent and you're doing your due diligence to keep your bees healthy and alive. And why they died, we don't know. CCD. And CCD is just an all-encompassing thing, right? It's everything. It's drought, it's mites, it's viruses, it's all these things that we can't put our fingers on. It's all of them. It's all of them. And there's so many variables, right? And so someone can say, well, what is CCD? That's it. It's everything. Okay. It's not one particular thing. It's this perfect storm of stuff that we face every year, right? It's crazy what we go through, and we're jumping around and chasing food and chasing health. Anyway, that program has really bailed a lot of people out. And I don't get any of that money because I don't have those kind of losses typically. Mm-hmm. But a lot of queens, a lot of packages, a lot of nukes, a lot of beehives, they're purchased with that money. And I know that, right? So that's just kind of the trickle down idea. And I believe that that's a great program and that's how it should work. Potentially there could be some abuse in any social program. We know that, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's mostly a good program.
Yeah, I've never been a part of either one of those, but I have excellent beekeeping company friends in our area that are very upfront about that. It's kept them in business at times, and this may be a year for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So then going back to how will people buy packages and queens and the finances of that? Well, that will be helpful for me, for sure, and for them too.
What do you think is the cause of these die-offs? Is there anything we can do to avoid coming to this point again? And I think, just the way that you've been talking, there are some broader industry, government, program interactions that may be contributing to this whole, and also just the health of the almond industry not being what it was. How do we not come here again?
CCD.
Oh. You talked about it already manifesting itself in the summer, that we were already, and
right.
Not just in one area, but right across the continent, there were already problems brewing.
Yeah, so some theories that I have heard, and they are theories, and that's how we work, right? We don't have any definites in this industry because there's just so many variables, right? That's what's going on outside the hive, what's going on inside the hive, which way did the wind blow? These are things that literally, that is one that creates a problem for us sometimes. What I heard in the Dakotas was there was a lot of people that are around sunflowers. There were potentially some insecticides that were used that are bee friendly, that are not bee friendly. And we really need to be looking at that, right? And we have the same thing here in sunflowers in California. I will not pollinate sunflowers unless it's a friend landowner that needs a couple hives. But the last time I did that, I lost 90% of those hives that were there, and I didn't have very many in there. And they were using bee-friendly sprays. So that was one in the Dakotas that people were talking about, that they went heavy on sunflowers, and they think they got smacked with insecticides. Another one was the weather patterns of the almond industry. They felt like that bees came home with a lot more brood, and so a lot more mites in the brood, and people were fighting that all along. And they could, once mites get at a very, very high level, it's super hard to bring those under control. It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
The best thing to do is be treating early when you have low levels of mites, right? And don't think that one time is enough. You got to keep doing it, right? And this is something that we've watched progress over the years, right? Where we used to keep those things under control pretty well, right? With fluvalinate was the first product that we had.
It was a great product at the time.
It was a great product, right? And it lasted a long time, right? And you would treat 2 strips a year, and they were $1 a strip, and people couldn't, oh, that's too much money, you know, man, what I would give for that today, right? And so that, you know, then when that went away, wow, then we really had to struggle. Keeping control of mites is absolutely critical at all times of the year, right? And I have a feeling that our industry as a whole, we don't want to treat for mites, because anyone my age or older remembers a time of no mites, right? And what bees were like, holy cow, they were unbelievable. They were huge. You know, you were worried about foul brood, and you were worried about starvation, and that was it, right? Other than that, bees were just healthy. It was not easy physically, but to have healthy hives was easy. And we remember that. And so for us we don't want to put anything into our hives. We don't want to put chemicals in there. I don't want to put acids in there. I don't want, you know, all these things that are on the market, that they all work, right? That was my talk in Oregon a couple of years ago, Harry, where I said, here's all these products and they all work. But the learning curve of how to use those things is,
absolutely.
It's just absolutely nuts, right? And so there's been the #1 chemical that we have relied on for many, many years is amitraz. And amitraz was a great product. It worked very well. It saved the bee industry. Let's be clear. I'll say it again. Amitraz saved the bee industry.
No question.
Without that, we would have had these incredible losses until little by little other things were introduced to us, other products were brought on the market, and people were fearful of those. Formic acid, very good product, very good. Kills queens sometimes. Oh, people don't want to hear that, right? I got to buy another queen or whatever. No, 5%, you know, it's nothing if you use it properly, right? But that's a learning curve that people don't want to take the time to learn. And I wish that Project Apis M or Oregon State or Washington State would look at the best way to use these products, because the scientists invent something, they say, look, it works, and then they give us this product, but the wind blows from the north instead of the south one day, it doesn't work. Okay, it does not work. And so people need to know these things. And we as beekeepers, we share that information amongst ourselves all the time, but who do you believe, right? That stuff killed my bees. No, that stuff didn't kill your bees. You let the mites get out of hand, and then your bees died, and you were throwing a Hail Mary by putting that on there, and they died, and you blaming it on that, right? And so that's gone on forever and continues to go on, right? There's a new amitraz product that's available now, and someone said it killed all their bees, right? So instantly there's this bad news about this product that probably isn't
Well, that's
true.
the legacy of Amatraz. Remember Mitecure way,
Yes.
way back. Then they
Yeah.
wouldn't bring it to market because of the litigation of that
No, that's
first
that's
product.
right.
Yeah.
They said, forget you beekeepers, and we'll never ever bring another product to market
Yeah.
because you go and do this, right? Well, we're always looking for a reason of why, and that was your original question. Why is this all happening? And it's all kinds of reasons, right?
For a nationwide extending clear up into Canada, wham, impact like this. Now,
Right.
I'm going to ask you this, but the answer could certainly be yes or no, but are we going to think that mites are the problem? I mean, I get it that there's some beekeepers did better than others, and boy, we know of some that have done horribly. But when it becomes a continent-wide, let's say,
Correct.
did we all fail in our mite control? That's where the conspiracy theories come out, that there's got to be more to it that we have not yet grasped. And thus the colony collapse disorder, or the CCD.
Sure. So it's always been that we blame it on mites, right? That's the easiest thing to blame it on. But I think what's happening with mites is that now we have all these new viruses that come out because of it. And maybe they're not new, but they're a lot more prevalent. And if you get into a mite stress, and then you get into a nutrition stress, which could very well happen in a drought year or something, and you're not doing anything to combat that with, say, artificial pollen patties or syrup or something to, and controlling those mites, well, then you're going to get those viruses, right? I think younger guys that are in the business now, like a generation after me, who have known nothing but mites, I think they have a whole different outlook on it and an understanding, right? And there's a lot of young guys that are movers and shakers in the bee business right now, and they get it, and they're not having these big losses. We're not doing this because we got a couple hives in the backyard and we're making a little bit of honey, right? We're doing it for agriculture, and agriculture absolutely demands the way agriculture is set up now. Mono agriculture demands that we do this, and so we're just answering a demand. We hate it, right? We know what the damage does to our bees, but that's our business. They say, hey, we need bees. Okay, we'll bring bees. This is how much it's going to cost, right? And we charge as much as we can, and then they do something that hurts our bees, and there's not much we can do about it, right? Except communicate. And we have very few problems here in California because we have programs where they have to contact you and let you know what they're going to spray and when they're going to spray. And if they don't do that, they will be held liable for that. And it's very, very, very helpful. And I get phone calls or texts all the time that, hey, we're going to spray over here, we're going to spray over there. And I call them back and I say, oh, that's okay. Or what are you spraying with? Oh, we're going to spray at night. Oh, okay, thank you. Then there's no problem. And so we work through it because I'm absolutely surrounded by agriculture now, and 25 years ago I wasn't.
Right.
But that's what has changed from driving old beat up trucks to brand new trucks, right? Is agriculture. That's where the money's coming from. So our industry there's not a lot of money, honestly, and so the money is coming from outside, and that's agriculture. We don't like mono agriculture. It's tough on bees, but it's also what is financing us. So that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? But
I think your one message there is very, very important. We need to get out more. It's obvious to us, but I'm sure a lot of people do not realize how absolutely critical to our food supply. I mean, you hear this brought up, oh yeah, 80% of the food you see in the grocery store, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, really, with monoculture, and not just a couple of, plots of garden in your backyard, with monoculture, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of acres of one thing.
Yeah.
And the population we have.
Yeah, the bumblebees are not going to do it, right? Because, they're not managed properly, right? And they're small, and so this managed beehive thing that we have going, right or wrong, is just answering a call of something that I don't necessarily agree with, right? I don't like the pesticides and the herbicides that are going. I grew up a hippie kid, so this stuff is disturbing to me, right? But it's also has become my business, and so, and I don't know how we get away with that. I mean, definitely there is movement in the right direction for sure in agriculture with cover cropping. This amazing thing that's going on in the almonds, and there's probably 1% of the crop is planted to cover crop, but that is really gaining. It's all about nutrition all the time, nutrition. So stuff falling apart. Why is it falling apart? Man, I really wish I knew. And how are we going to get through this? And for next year, we're going to rebuild, and we're going to hope for better conditions, and we're going to hope for better forage and better honey production. But I think as long as there's this demand for 2 million beehives in California every year, we will be struggling with that. And I contend that is where the problem started, was the massive growth of the almond industry.
Oh yeah.
Which we love. So what are we to do?
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button, where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.